Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. So I'm finally posting this video. I did a Payne's Gray Inktense Grisaille for a Mucha Evening Star study on a live stream some time ago. Alphonse Mucha, or Mucha, was a landmark Art Nouveau artist, and when it comes to style, he's really a man after my own heart. I adore his stylized realism, bold ink outlines, the heavy influence from Eastern cultures in the jewelry, arabesques, the decorations and patterns, as well as the fantastical themes, and the exaggerated posing all his people do. These are all things I loved even before I discovered his art, and when I did, it was like finding someone who understood how to take all these things I loved and make them amazingly beautiful together. I'm using just one color for the value underpainting in Payne's Gray Inktense. It's a very suitable staining shadow color for dark values in watercolor as well. Instead of using it straight from the block, I've shaved the Payne's Gray into a palette well off of the Inktense block with a razor blade or X-Acto knife. I used an Arches cold press watercolor block that's meant for landscapes for this piece, but it's perfect for the narrow length of the woman in our Mucha study. It's a fun, unconventional use of the narrow landscape block, but smoother, hot press paper would have been a better choice for gliding on fine inking lines. Grisaille is a monochromatic value underpainting technique, separating tone from color like the old masters, and it can make difficult paintings easier. Ever since I did my Grisaille videos on watercolor, I've seen Grisaille pop up a lot more as a known term on YouTube. I didn't invent it, it's a centuries-old technique, but it was almost non-existent on YouTube, which is why I made a lot of YouTube videos on it, and they've been some of my most popular videos. In fact, someone from a bigger watercolor channel said in my video comment section some time back that he didn't know about Grisaille as a formal term until he saw my video, and I was so happy to read that, but when I heard him mention Grisaille in one of his future videos, I was sad that I didn't get a shout out. I wish he and another big YouTube crafting channel, both of them subscribers to my little channel at some point, had referred back to my newish, much smaller channel just in passing as a helpful courtesy when they eventually introduced the term Grisaille in their own videos. I know that bigger YouTube channels are very busy and such an oversight can slip by and might seem like a small thing not worth complaining about, but giving credit to a smaller, newer channel like mine is valuable for its growth. You can't make people do it, but it's in the spirit of fairness, even if it takes some extra time. That's why you'll hear me reference botanical painters like Sandrine Moggy or Susan Harrison Testain, or illustrators like Alex Ross using the technique even if they don't all call it Grisaille, and urging my viewers to check out their books or their channels. It's a shame that across YouTube, not just in art videos, that when YouTubers copy other YouTubers' ideas, they give credit if it's a larger channel and not a small channel like mine where they don't gain from it. Anyway, when it comes to doing Grisaille, if you don't have Inktense, you can use a waterproof liquid ink or a staining watercolor color like Payne's Gray Bluish, neutral tint, sepia, phthalo blue, indigo, black, or a shadow mix of your color palette for the Grisaille. As you can see in my Grisaille variations video, along with the gray or Grisaille, a green or Verdaille, a brown or Brunaille, or warm-cool value combos or shadow mixes and so on can be used to suit the subject and color scheme of various pieces. And to have an easier time spotting values, you can desaturate an image to just black and white to see just dark and light values. You can also squint or use a tinted value finder, or zoom out of an image to help gauge your values. And getting further away from an image or viewing it in a mirror or flipping it upside down or horizontally or just coming back to it after several days can help you look at your painting with fresh eyes. Some shadows have soft or hard edges or both soft and hard edges in different places when you lay down these values. Inktense tends to go dry quicker in a brush than watercolor, so I found that I have to use it wetter. Don't dry brush spackle Inktense on, as it'll reconstitute a little bit on the paper and run if you glaze over that dry brushing. To keep it from bleeding a little bit like that with water later, Inktense just needs to be fully saturated when you first apply it to activate the waterproof nature of it. This is not a problem with liquid inks, but something to keep in mind with Inktense. As far as brushes go, for inking, you can use pretty much anything, but I found that using a small or short belly brush will give you more controlled brush strokes for the outlines, or you could use a 20/0 spotter or a small round, and I use both for all of my fine outlining for maximum control. But you can of course use a full-bellied round or a liner or an angle or whatever you find comfortable. And when it comes to other inks and inking, I found that Dr. Phil Martin's inks are great for outlining, but they don't layer well in large swaths under watercolor. I can use them for the thin ink outlining under watercolor or other water media, but not in large patches, including Grisaille washes. The shiny-ish skin that the Dr. Phil Martin's inks form sort of repels later watercolor layers a little bit. Meanwhile, the Inktense behaves very much like watercolor or gouache, even though it's an ink product. Unlike the liquid inks I own, it's resoluble in a palette, so it's reusable after it dries, which is magical, and it layers well with itself and other water media, like watercolor, gouache, or watercolor crayon. It's permanent when it dries on paper, which is great for layering, but limits blending time on paper. So you can lay it down wet into wet for more blending time before it dries and doesn't budge. I also use Inktense wet on dry, but it's where I'm doing ink lines in an outline format and not for form contouring or glazes. The amazing Mucha utilized halos, thick ink outlines, swirling arabesque forms, organic and floral forms, Middle Eastern headpieces and jewelry. All these make his pieces more stylized and decorative. But he also had soft edges and blending on the forms within the ink lines, which you can see here, and Grecian fabric folds everywhere, both which push towards the realistic. So it's a lovely mix of realistic rendering and stylized forms and inking. And his marriage between Eastern and Western aesthetic really speaks to me. I'm an East-West hybrid myself, and stylized decorative realism is what I naturally tend towards in my personal style. So we'll see a lot of Mucha studies on my channel probably, as they're very pleasant and natural to me. Included in this is his elegant postures versus the more natural resting forms or narrative action that you can see in other people's pieces. It's something else that I do so much myself that I've actually been advised by art editors to be more narrative sometimes rather than postural, which I never like. I actually really prefer the fantastical posturing. It's so much more attractive as an art form, even if it's not natural in the real world. Other Golden Age illustrators I like because they utilize the decorative posing that I prefer are J.C. Leyendecker and Maxfield Parrish. If you search for Mucha's work online, you'll find some photos he used and the paintings that resulted, and it's amazing how much of the fantastical he added to those photos, which are in black and white and comparatively drab without the color, but also no embellishments and creative backgrounds, which he all sort of made up and added later. Getting back to how I'm doing the painting, one of my viewers said I shepherd the pigment, and I really like that description because I never thought of it that way. So thanks for that, Monkey Spittle, I think that was. Once you put some paint down wet on wet, you have two options. You can let it bleed and go wherever it wants to go randomly, which is great for abstract effects, or you can mold the edges of it and push the wet paint around some to match the form shadows you are trying to render. And that's where shepherding is a great word. And as I've explained in past videos, taking time to learn to draft and do a strong drawing really pays off, because you can continue to draw and draft just with the paint on top of a hardly there, sparse, guiding pencil line drawing. I do most of my rendering in paint now, I find it much more fun and natural than doing a pencil drawing in detail. But if you limit yourself to tracing, this will not happen as fast or as well. So try not to use tracing as a crutch, as tempting as that might be. You can use it as a tool to transfer your own drawings from sketch paper to watercolor paper, or as an efficiency tool to speed sparse sketching up once your drawing skills are decent, but don't use it as a replacement for good drafting skills because it'll hurt your painting skills. Just be patient and enjoy the sketching process, and your drafting and painting skills will come along. So I got part of this grisaille done over live stream. I tried to do the hardest parts on camera and do a mix of skin and fabric and outlines. Then this piece got put aside for a few weeks, and I eventually went and finished the remaining grisaille off camera, and you might have seen that I posted it to Instagram. It's always a lot of fun for me to do the grisaille because it's just one shadow color here, and I can relax and just draw in the values with the paint and not think about the colors at all. It will come later and separately. This separation is what makes it such a useful technique to make complicated pieces easier. And as a result, you'll probably find that your colors are more thoughtful and interesting once you do put them in, because you're not sort of bogged down with thinking about values at the same time as you're doing your colors. And sometimes a grisaille is so pretty and you might want to just stop here and not add any colors at all. I think I will add colors to this one in the future, but this is where this video will stop today. Again, thanks for parking your brushes here. Please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my website links below. If you're interested in buying my originals or prints, please visit my website for info. And until next time, wishing you all fantastical painting adventures.